to yet another episode of Smash the Bug. I'm your host, Joseph Maxwell, and
I'm Jesse.
We are here together to bring to you the latest news and some interesting stories of some battles that we fought through here in the past week or two, since whenever we last recorded an episode. Share with you to encourage you on your journey as an e-commerce developer. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on YouTube. It's under the SwiftOtter Inc. channel there, or it's on all your favorite podcast syndication platforms, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Look for Smash the Bug there. You will find it. So, let's jump into a quick section about news. Jesse, what do we got here?
Okay, got a couple of things that I thought were pretty cool. One is in JavaScript, we're getting a @ method, and it's everywhere currently except for Safari. Thanks, Safari. Why is that becoming the new Internet Explorer, by the way?
Because it is the new Internet Explorer.
Yeah, it's kind of a pain to work with in my experience. Anyways, we're getting the @ method, and what the @ method does is it's kind of like the square brackets access for an array. Looking up an index, you can get an index, but there's a couple things that are a little bit convenient about it, like you can do negative. So you can go from the end of the array backwards on there, which means instead of the whole array square brackets and then array.length -1 thing that we always used to do. Now we do array.at -1. And I saw that thanks to Westboz, but I thought it was a pretty cool feature. One of those things that'll save us like 5 characters when we're writing code, but it's like, oh, that's pretty cool, and I liked it.
Well, it reminds me of I wish PHP had that. They have like the array unshift, and I always get confused. The array unshift, the array pop, the reset, and the end. However, the problem is those are all referenced. The values passed in there are referenced. So it's not like it's like what this @ would be. Like, I just want to get the first value of this array. I just got out of my resource model. I just got this value from the database. Need the first value out of this array. But that @ sounds really nice.
Yeah, I'm partial to JavaScript myself, but it's cool to see PHP kind of picking up some cues from JavaScript, with the arrow functions and things like that. So as JavaScript keeps progressing, I'm sure PHP will add some of these things, or hopefully it will.
In the next couple years.
PHP 9 or something like that, that comes out.
Yeah.
But the other thing is a Adobe conference online, of course, thanks to the past events of the last year or so. Online event about developers, technical conference, that sort of thing. From what I could see, there's only 2 events that are specifically related to Magento, to Adobe Commerce. A lot of them were related to Adobe Cloud, Experience, those products, but 2 of them specifically focused on Adobe Commerce, it looks like. So something to check out.
Interesting. Well, my news that I have is not necessarily the most, let's just say the most productive news, but actually, Jesse, it was you. I don't know where you came across this link. But it's a link, and we'll get a person who's editing this to put the link up in the show notes. Make sure that it's very easy for you to click on. But it was like the best illustration ever. It's called a parody of the legitimate thing. But it's if you go to the domain name is howiexperiencewebtoday.com, but you put a hyphen in between each one of those words. So how-I-etc. experiencewebtoday.com. It sadly illustrates the place of advertising and user experience that we kind of learn to brush aside on a daily basis as we are browsing the internet. It's incredibly funny, and I got a huge kick out of it. And the value, and I think for us, is just it brings to a front how obnoxious this stuff is for our users. Are we really that interested in signing up for a newsletter after we've barely scrolled down a page? Some of the stuff that people think, oh yeah, that's a good idea. We have somebody that's engaged now, but in reality, it's just plain obnoxious, and people are just going to find that X button and click out of it.
Without going too much into a spoiler, it is uncannily similar to the game Whack-A-Mole. And unfortunately, that's how we do sometimes on the web.
Yeah.
We introduce all of these steps that someone has to go through in order to just get to what they want to get to.
That's right. That's right. And the other thing I just want to throw out is our Slack channel. It's swiftotter.com/Slack. I know this is not technically news, but I have been just so excited to see people jump into this community and provide ask great questions as well as provide really solid, good answers. My goal is that it is the helpful Magento Stack Exchange. Magento Stack Exchange, no shade thrown there, but you just never know whether you're going to get a good answer or a not really good answer. But my goal is with this Slack community, swiftotter.com/Slack, that I'm watching it. There's some really sharp, talented folks that are also watching it, providing super good answers. We help each other out, and it's absolutely fantastic community. So if you're listening to Smash the Bug here today, I want to invite you to participate in this community. It's a phenomenal, growing, wonderful place. I mean, it's growing like crazy, and I'm super excited about it. With that, I say let's jump into our next segment of this episode as we talk about the difficult bugs that we've smashed here since our last conversation, which I guess was it a week or two ago, 2 weeks ago?
Something like that.
I mean, we had some travel going on here, so
yep.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to record this remotely. I don't know. It wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I was gone working on a slower internet connection than normal, but still got things done.
Yeah. I guess that's remote work, and that's one of the benefits of being able to be remote. You can work anywhere as long as you got decent internet. And
boy, and that has come a long ways with all the technological improvements since say 2010 or something like that.
Yes,
that's really nice.
Yep, I'm about to actually go on a trip to my in-laws, and they recently upgraded their internet. I haven't been out there since they upgraded their internet, but it was slow enough. I'm thinking, where can I, I'm looking for a fix, except I'm looking for where can I go to Starbucks or something that I can just get some good internet, have this meeting without having the jitters in the meeting. So anyways, I'll go first. We've shared a number of challenges we've had with this particular project, and it's really just a blast of a project. Absolutely love working on this. It requires that we have to think about approaches, make sure that it's performant, that it's meeting this. Well, we always want to be meeting the merchant's needs, and this particular merchant, in my experience, seems a little more complex than most. When I say most merchants are looking for a beautiful theme, maybe some functionality, but this one there's like tons and tons of custom functionality through it. One aspect of this is pre-calculating prices. So the price attribute in Magento is not necessarily specified or fed from their ERP. Okay, here's our cost, here's our markup, and then we're just going to feed it into the price attribute on the Magento side. It's calculated from a lot of different factors. So they sell configurable products, and these configurable products obviously are made up of a whole bunch of simple products, and the simple products end up driving the price for that parent configurable product to be able, like as shown on the product list pages, the category pages. And we were running into an issue where most of these products, the simple products, they would when they re-index for the pricing, and this is not using the Magento pricing re-index capabilities. When we tried to rebuild the price for a simple product, that would usually work fine until we ran into a situation where there was a configurable product that had, say 1,000 child products. And because the thing is, we re-index the parent configurable product, which ends up re-indexing all the child products. So in a single request, we might have 1,000 child products that are requested, which ultimately means it's about 10,000 pricing operations that have to happen. And since we're using RabbitMQ in the back end, firing off Q consumers, and I know I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here, we have some time constraints we also have to keep in mind as well. But all that to say, the challenge for me was we kept having these 1,000 products, simple product configurables that just wouldn't re-index. And how would we make that happen? Because we have to index all the child configurable or all the child simple products first, and then we can get the prices for the parent. And I really beat my head quite a while on this, trying to think of, okay, do we create like a batching system? But how do we then break apart the simple products from the configurable, because they were pretty well tied together? If we want to reindex the parent configurable, then we have to also reindex all the children as well. And I don't remember, there was some impetus that I wish I cannot remember specifically. I think I was looking in that pricing engine, the pricing indexer, and I was like, wait, what if I use the same logic in this queuing system that we already have, indexing one product at a time in there, and I actually load all the simple products in there, and I just put a parent ID column on there. So every simple product has a parent ID column, which references back to the parent configurable, and that parent configurable will not run until all of the child simple products have been indexed. And what I thought was going to be actually a several day challenge as far as trying to re-engineer the whole pricing engine, because that's what it seemed like it was going to take. It ended up being, I think it was 4 hours to utilize the same mechanism. It's just in a slightly different way. And so the takeaway, Jesse, I don't know if you have any other thoughts there, but the takeaway that I came away from that with was the solution is, at least sometimes, and I think probably more often than we would realize, is way more within our reach than we might think it is. Sometimes the challenge that I struggle with is I can shoot for the stars, shoot for the bigger solution, whereas in reality I can back that off quite significantly and get the project done faster and might even be a better solution. We've already vetted this. There's very little bugs in this system. So just reusing 98% of it versus having to rebuild 50% of the whole deal.
I think you're right, and I think part of that comes down to that investigatory phase before actually starting work. I actually ran into something...
Take an inventory TAD process.
Yes, exactly. Something kind of like that just a couple days ago relating to banner images. It's quite tricky to get some text and a focal point in a big banner image on a website to coincide as you go from large screen, like basically like almost any screen size. Because usually what happens is that aspect ratio is very different. You can't just like resize it, because then it would get really, really small, and that would be like weird. So to put those two things together and have them actually work well can be fairly tricky. And there's a couple more obvious solutions to the problem that I kind of saw when I started off, but I didn't accept those because they would take too much time to do. And so I tried to look past those initial like thoughts or ideas to see if there was something that I could build that maybe was a little bit harder to find, but might take less time in the long run, because we didn't have to use something completely custom or something like that. So it's kind of what I am hearing from you as well, like that investigating further than one thinks and looking to see if you can find that solution.
That's right.
Before actually like jumping into the whole big project, which sometimes is necessary to take the bull by the horns and like
it is.
Tear the whole thing apart. But in this case, like, what's a solution that might be there that will take less time, but will actually do a good job?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just looking at our screen right here, and I wanted to throw out there, the reason it seems like we're a little bit lower in the frame is not because I didn't feel like taking the time to set it up, but mostly because I'm in the middle of recording a whole bunch of business practitioner videos for our business practitioner course. And I just really did not feel like trying to get it set back up exactly the same way. So we're sitting a little bit lower. I guess we could just kind of do one of these things, but I block the whole image behind me. So normally I'd lower the camera down just a little bit. But so that's why it seems like we're kind of framed just a little bit differently than normal. But
yes, if you see us on YouTube, that's why things look a little wonky.
That's right. Yes, and while you're there, make sure you subscribe. So that was my bug. It was an interesting challenge. I was very happy to come across a much more simple, and I think in the long run, it actually was the best solution. Very robust. It actually gives us much better reporting, which was something that this merchant was asking for. Better reporting, more granular information as far as any errors that were run across. And so it was an absolute win-win on all accounts, and I was really happy about that. It's not too often that the solution like checks every single box possible.
That's awesome, and that's rewarding to do that
Yes.
sort of a fix after
Yep.
working on something for a long time. It feels good. It feels good to fix a bug that's been hanging around in the system for a while.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah, so I worked on something here not too long ago, and front end's more of my thing, but Knockout is not more of my thing. But it had to do with Knockout, and it was kind of not a particularly buried problem, but there was a couple steps that had to be taken in order to get to this. And I think just most people in working on it, like on our team, just kind of missed that first step. You had to like add a item to a list first, and then without refreshing the page, do an action on it, like change a value. And this page is one, it was like a order type of page, and it's refreshed fairly often. So it's easy to overlook that first step.
That would
You have
make
to
sense,
add,
yeah.
don't refresh, and then change the value. And so anyways, I got in there, and at first I missed it, but then I was like, oh wait, they did say first add and then change the value. So I started looking at that. Well, there was just a JavaScript error like, hey, there's no function to call here, but we're trying to call a function, which is related to Knockout's special feature where you like, so Knockout has this concept called observables, and it's similar to React's useState hook, or in Vue.js you can return the data object with a bunch of values that are then become computed dynamic, re-render the content, all that. So in Knockout, you have to call it like a function if you do that. So instead of it being the standard object property that's just that you would access without any parentheses, you have to actually call it with parentheses. So where the error was coming up, it was saying, hey, there's no function here to call. So we were calling dot value parentheses, and there was no dot value. And it's kind of interesting to me to note that in some of the other systems, that bug might have been a little bit more difficult to find, meaning it wouldn't have been throwing the same sort of error. In this case, it was like, oh, this is obviously not there at that point when it was firing a request. So I started looking there, but ended up tracing back in the call stack in DevTools in the browser, looking back in DevTools is nice because it captures a kind of like a snapshot of the state for each frame in that call stack. And so looking back through those, especially for the custom ones like our JavaScript files, and not really worrying about the knockout.js or any of the other files that were in that call stack. So looking back through there carefully to see where did this problem start to come up. And I found the method where an object was being built. And I noticed that there were two places where this object was being built. And they were two different places.
There you go.
So on refresh, there was one place that was building this object. When you added a new item, there was another place that built this object. And the solution was actually to bring those two things together and build it in the same place. And it was one of those really fun PRs where I had like minus 17 lines and plus 10 lines. So I net minus 7 lines of code, which I always like.
That is so good.
Less technical debt, easier to manage going forwards and everything. But I could have just applied a Band-Aid to that because where it was happening on the request, I could have like added an if statement and checked, hey, is this property available? Okay, if it is, then call it like a function for Knockout.
Right.
But instead of that, what I did was I used those developer tools there in the browser to trace back and find the root of that issue. And it showed me where the actual problem was coming up, even though the actual error was showing up later in that call stack.
Nice.
And so I thought it was a great bug from that standpoint, where I had to go back to the source, go back to the beginning, and it wasn't exactly where it could have been, because that was where the error was.
That's well put. That's well put. And I think one thing I heard in what you were saying there is duplication or doing things twice is a really bad idea. And I know there's a couple of reasons why it could happen. For example, hey, I just missed that it was already there. Like, that's already been built out, whatever. Like,
like if another developer built it.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
we come in and are like, hey, we need to do something.
Yeah, so, and that's probably, it's legitimate. But at the end of the day, that duplication, it's killed us on a number of occasions. We end up with duplicate code. And that's one of the reasons I know the whole idea, the architecture behind MSI, multi-source inventory and Magento, has gotten some knocks. And I think I would say there's definitely some architectural, there's some performance considerations. Let's just put it that way there. However, we've really adopted this idea as well internally in the code that we built with this idea of these actions. And I know I keep talking about this, but the actions, basically every module has an actions directory, and it's these single function, single method, single public method, pieces of business logic. And we create one of them and we funnel that through that. And if we need to create some modifications, that's where the questions start. Okay, should we just add an extra parameter? Should we build out another one of these actions that actually calls the initial action? Like, there's those questions that we can work through at that point. But working to simplify our logic as much as possible and have it run every single time, route through the exact same path, boy, that eliminates bugs. Totally eliminates bugs. Absolutely. That's great. Well, I think it's going to be a little bit shorter, so 21 minutes for our podcast today. It'll be just a little bit shorter. Jesse's under a time crunch, but we had a couple things we wanted to share, jump on here, share with you all. Again, thank you for participating. Thank you for listening to this. I hope that you find it helpful. I certainly appreciate the comments, your suggestions. It's incredibly motivating for us as you guys interact, engage, and the goal is to help you as a developer completely flourish. And as you flourish, that makes our day. So with all that, thank you for watching. Thank you for participating. It's a pleasure to have you here. And I wish you the best as you seek to become an excellent e-commerce debugger.